Me tuning in. I hope that you're enjoying this virtual version of these offerings. Um, Hopefully they're of service. So please leave comments and whatever feedback you got. Share these with friends. Make sure you subscribe to Promise Resource Network's YouTube channel if you haven't already. And you can also make sure that you are notified. So you can set a little bell so you'll get a little ping whenever Promise Resource Network goes live so you can catch it live. So that's cool. So, anyway, I hope you're so well wherever you are in this right now moment. So, something that I wanted to kind of talk about today, it sounds like I have notes. I don't. These are literally just things that I've drawn into a stack of them. They just happen to be sitting right there. So, anyway, um, so I want to talk about some mental stuff. And through this mental conversation, we'll see how it affects our body and we'll see how it affects our spirit and how it plays out in this realm of wellness, health, and recovery. So I'm excited. I absolutely love the mind, first of all. Like I love that our mind is so capable of changing. I love that our mind is agile, that we can think new thoughts, we can navigate our thoughts, we can take our thoughts and movement to a whole other direction, that we can get sucked into thought patterns, that our mind is kind of fuzzy. Our mind is like the motherboard of this whole experience that we call human. I don't know why I'm hiccuping and burping right now. Maybe it's because I need to eat. I don't know. Who knows? Either way. Um, but I love the mind. And the mind has such a big role in our entire health and wellness, like for real. And what I've noticed is in our culture, um, and I share what is culturally given to us because for me it gives me and everyone else so much more grace because it's like, oh, like yeah, I get why I am the way I am and like everybody else is too. And then I can have more grace. So anyway, so in our culture we have really been trained to think very linearly. Think from point A to point B in the straightest path possible. We're taught that the fastest point is the best way, that the most direct route, just get there, get her done, you know? Um, and we're taught this when we look at like math, when we're taught math, it's like, this is the equation that you follow. This is just how you do it. And I remember being in school and um was it there were a few different subjects. Like statistics was one of them, and hmm, there was another one, another mathy kind of a class or whatever, some sciencey math. And I would just know the answers, and I wouldn't be able to show my work. And they needed to see my work. They needed to see my process so that they could tell me if my process was correct. They didn't care, although I was graded on the answer, was it A, B, C, or D? That's what the grade is on, but I had to show the work. And so it was like not only was I tested on the answer being correct, but I was also tested to see if my method of regurgitation of learning was the method that they told me it should be. And so what that does is it tells us that there's only one right way to think. If I feel or if I believe that there's only one right way to think, then that doesn't give me any space for new thoughts, for agile thoughts, for creative thoughts, for the creative mind. It doesn't also allow me to maybe feel okay or normal if someone tells me that the way I think or see things is weird or different or out of the box. And that might then create a space for me to not feel safe to share my thoughts, to not let it, I don't want anybody to know what I'm thinking because if they know what I'm thinking, then they're going to think I'm weird because I was told that my method of thinking isn't right. So then we grow up in this reality, this culture of human that says that the way I think is not okay. The way I come up with solutions isn't okay. And that disconnect with our creative mind, I think, is a huge, like, just travesty in this world. It's like, what? We don't, we're not supposed to think outside the box. We're not even supposed to recognize that we're in a box. And what I've noticed, and I'm curious what you all think, what I've noticed is that those people in the world who have had the most addictive patterns, so those who've used more drugs or who've drank a lot, who've had unhealthy relationships with substances, are actually a lot more brilliant. And the way their mind works is kind of unique. And because the system doesn't know what to do with those minds, it shames those minds and those ways of thinking so that the person doesn't feel good or confident about themselves and feels like something's wrong with them. And then when we feel like something's wrong with us, unless we remember that there's nothing wrong with us, that's when we start to do addictive patterns and addictive behaviors. Couple that with trauma. So we're set up basically to either be a parrot and be repetitive in the way we think. And in that setup, if we're a parrot and we repeat exactly how we're taught to be and think, then we get rewarded. But if we think outside of the box, unless we're coming up with something that's going to make somebody else a lot of money, we're punished for that. I don't know why I'm yawning. I haven't maybe done enough breath work today. I don't know. I'm really not tired. Anyway, so kind of thinking about that. Like the people that I've spoken with, and myself included, like I remember, y'all, so I was in journalism in high school, and the very first assignment before, like, it was like the first day of the class, and the teacher was um, really brilliant, great writer, great journalist, and she had us write a story and she had a Coca-Cola can sitting on her desk. And she said, "All right, write a story about this Coke can." So I'm writing and I'm like, yeah, I'm getting it out. And so everybody's writing. And I don't know if we had to read it out loud or if she read them out loud. I don't remember. But either way. So other kids' stories were read and they were, we only wrote for a couple minutes. So they were very short. But the stories were like, um, teacher missing, and the last remaining evidence was her Coca Cola can left on the desk. A story like, um, there's a tornado that blew through the school, and, you know, but the journalism room was saved, and whatever, and the Coke can was still there. Like whatever, right? These stories. Um, my story was that a little green alien lived inside of the Coke can. And I basically talked about the whole world that this little green alien lived in this Coke can. My story was the most different for sure. And I remember she read it and she was like, um, this isn't this is different. And I was like, yeah. She was like, so like none of this is fact. Like none of this is fact. But the other stories could be probable in fact land, but mine was like too far out there. And that's when that was me really realizing that the way I see things, the way my imagination works, the way I create is different. And so for me to continue in the journalism path of writing and then continuing further in college, a lot of science, so a lot of research papers, a lot of studies, and just like giving the facts about the studies and the research that I had done or that others had done and putting all these research studies together was very like real. And so just kind of thinking like I haven't really written that many like made up stories after that, like fiction or fun stuff. That was just in my mind's eye. And and it's interesting because when I was in like fifth grade, we all wrote a story and like mine won an award. And it was a story that I made up. And I liked it. It was about the end of the world and the beginning of the new world. Can't make this up now, can you? Um, but all that to say is I remember that moment of that reflection from this journalism teacher, basically reflecting that like what I was thinking was weird. And I internalized that. I took it personally. I thought, well, there's something wrong with me then, right? And and how many times has something like that happened to one of us, to each of us, that it's like, well, how did you know that? Why did you think that? What made you say that? And then what that does though is it turns off our creative mind because we feel embarrassed or ashamed. And we see this with like little kids who have spiritual gifts. You know, they might hear voices. They might see angels or ghosts or ancestors from the land. They might be able to communicate with the animals. They might communicate with the plants. And these are spiritual gifts. They might see through the dimensions and into the next timelines and the other timelines and all these other things. And a lot of these kids were told that they were crazy and they were told to basically shut these gifts down. And when we shut down part of our gifts, it kind of drives us bonkers. And so I see a lot of people who are very spiritually gifted, have a brilliant mind, a very brilliant creative mind, and they're either very medicated or they're afraid to let these gifts out. Um, or they've turned to addictive patterns and behaviors that have harmed their brain. So that's a part of reality. So just kind of check in with yourself without any judgment. Like maybe you too or someone who had a brilliant mind, a creative mind, or you had spiritual gifts. They're very similar in this realm of conversation. And maybe these gifts were shamed. Maybe you were made to feel like a fool, an idiot, or wrong. And just give yourself a lot of compassion if that's you. That no kid, no human should ever really be told those things. Like that what you're thinking is wrong. That the way you think is not right. That you're weird because the way you see patterns, the way you get the answer, the way you experience your life through your eyes and your lens. Like hold yourself and know that that's not right to be told those things. And if you were told those things or made to feel those ways, that man, they strengthened your ass up to get you where you are right now. I know mine sure did. Literally. Like it all strengthened me to create Jane as Jane is on this right now moment. And I wouldn't trade her for the world because shit, she knows a lot more than I ever thought I ever would. And she's still learning, right? So I share all this because then it's like, well, now what? Like, now what do I do? What do I do now that I've maybe been shutting my mind down this whole time, or I haven't let my mind be creative, or I've only thought the one way and I can't even think about how I can change my thoughts. And for me, it's always been looking through the lens of another's perspective. So, what that can look like is just allowing ourselves to look at something from a different perspective. So, for example, say you are Democrat. You are like, go team Democrat, and I'll never be Republican. Well, what if I told you today that you have to be Republican and you have to like fight for your right to be a Republican? Like, what would, like, how would you see that? Or vice versa. Or, if you are in a man body, can you imagine what it would be like to live in a woman's body, have a woman's experience? And if you're in a woman body, like, can you imagine living as a man who's been programmed and conditioned to not feel or express emotions other than anger, and that would be rewarded? If you're a man, imagine a woman in her body where she's told that she's nothing but over emotional and she's too emotional. Like, by allowing ourselves to see through these other lenses starts to open our mind. I also like the tool of our imagination. I feel that the imagination is one of the best gifts ever. That's where worlds are created. So it's like, so I drink my water out of my glass jar. So I'm going to take a sip. It's a big sip. Tastes good. Water. And so, I could think about, well, where did that water come from? Well, it came from a faucet. Where did that water come? And eventually, I'm not going to have an answer, right? Eventually, I'm not going to know exactly where it came from. Eventually, I'm going to tap into, like, maybe it was the lake, maybe it was the ocean, it was a cloud at some point. I don't know. Spring that's bubbling up water from the underworld of, I don't know, maybe Agartha, the Middle Earth is bubbling up water just for us, fresh and delicious spring water. And so then I can start to let my imagination take me around this curiosity. Um, this curiosity of like, I wonder how deep the tree roots are. Like, yeah, I could test it or I could Google it and be like, hey, Google, how deep does the oak tree roots grow? I could do that, but it's not as much fun as just kind of like imagining, well, maybe it goes down the depth of my house. Maybe it goes down 2 houses deep. And then if it goes down 3 houses deep, and then like, could I live in the roots? And just like allow our imagination to go there. Because when we allow our imagination to go there, we allow our minds to grow there. And that means that we create new neural pathways. So we literally create new lines of information in our brain. That's magic right there. That's the magic of the brain. That's neuroplasticity. So we can create new thoughts. So that means, I can also read new books and check out new information and check out new documentaries and talk to new people and experience new cultures. And I can do all those things. And I can just use my own imagination and create my own stories of make believe. Because there's no wrong or right in the land of make believe. What that does is it allows this linear thinking mind, the right, wrong, this is the way you're supposed to think mind. It lets that mind just kind of relax for a little bit, kind of take the back seat and just like chill out. And it allows the higher mind, it allows both of the hemispheres of the brain to work together. I think that when both hemispheres, both sides of the brain work together, that's the way the higher mind thinks together. So I feel that when we do that, we can start to tap into like spiritual gifts because then we're not being blocked on, well, how am I seeing that? How am I hearing that? What am I hearing? And questioning it from this place of doubt, but just, okay, so what if I did hear voices? Well, whose voice is it? Does it sound like my grandmother's? Does it sound like my voice? What does the voice feel like? And we can start opening up to, um, psychic abilities or claircognizance, clairsentience, audiomancy. Audiomancy is when we can hear, like we literally can hear things. It sounds like somebody's talking to you. We can tap into like mediumship gifts, like whatever, because we're energetic beings. And we all have gifts, and some gifts are, I can do math fast, and some gifts are like I can create a great business, and some gifts are I can bend spoons with my mind. We're all different. And if I don't believe that I can do anything, I don't even let my mind chill out, then I'm not going to be able to tap into some really cool stuff about myself. And kind of going back to when we were kids, like if you had spiritual gifts as a kid, and they were like squashed, you were shamed for them, told that they weren't real. If you were told that you were lying, maybe you were punished because somebody didn't believe you. So now you were inflicted with pain because you were being your honest self with your gifts. So it may not feel like the safest thing to do now. So my invitation is to just let your mind wander into this land of make believe, and no need to act on anything, but just be curious and see what the mind does. When we can have a creative mind, it leads to so much more joy and fun in the world. And I don't know about y'all, but like I've had my life of like pain, suffering, hardship, grief, lack, addiction, all this shit. A lot of healing stuff. And I've had a lot of amazing things. So many amazing things. Like so much has been just beyond comprehension, gifts all over the place. And I always want it to be more. I always want more. I want the more, the better, the next. While I still love and appreciate all that I have and all that I've received before this now. So, my invitation for all of us is to just like open up our creative mind. Just open it up. Tell ourselves it's okay to think outside the box, that someone may not understand it. If y'all knew how many kids and how many adults and how many beings I've had in my space, and I'm holding circles and groups all the time for years now. For years, I've held groups and circles and conscious conversations among all types of folks. And I love it because there's usually one person that shares something and it's like out of this world. I'm like, I had nothing to do with what we were talking about. And I love it because it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me actively listening. It keeps me being agile so that I don't shame them for what they shared, but that I can include them with what they shared and also weave it into what maybe the topic is that they had diverted from. For us to do that, to be able to still share with this creative mind, listen to others' creative minds, feel safe in speaking from this creative mind space, when we can do that without any judgment, we're not only healing ourselves, but we're healing this path in front of us for children to grow up into so that they can have a free thinking, creative mind to be fully expressed. And that's the world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where, like, the kiddos, and not just kids, but humans in general, are creating some dope ass shit of like amazing ideas with, it's like you just created a water filter that will filter out all the plastics and nanoparticles so that all the fish live and we can survive, and it's an easily created thing that's affordable. Yes. Yes. Like whoever can think of these like just brilliant ideas, not just in the forms of like what next program can I create on the computer to make the life on the screen feel more real, but how can I make life feel more real? Like life is so real, and we're just muddying life with pollution, with whatever pollution that we're muddying it with. So for me, clean that shit up. Then we're like really like letting life be the creative force that it is, which will inspire us to then how can I work with life more? How can I let life work for me? How can life work for me? How can I work for life? And it turns into this really beautiful symbiotic relationship between humans and nature. Right? That just sounds cool to me. But if I'm too busy thinking, well, I'm supposed to solve math this way, this is the way I'm supposed to solve math, this is the only way to solve math, and I'm not going to be able to tap into literally half of my brain. Not only can I not tap into that half of my brain, but that half of my brain that I'm not able to tap into can't communicate with the other half of the brain. It's one brain. It's just both sides do something totally different. So I just wanted to nerd out on the mind and the gifts of the creative mind, and why as a collective we haven't been able to freely use our creative mind, and how we can use our creative mind. We can think out of the box. We can be weird. We can tell fun stories that are just like, is that even true? And be able to be like, no, it's not true, but it was cool, right? And not just like, no, I'm telling you lies. I'm not like, no, but like we can use our minds for the gifts of the mind that it is. It's such a gift. Y'all, this mind is dope. It's so cool. It's so cool. I love that we get a mind. We get to have a mind and we can make decisions with it. We can think freely and openly and creatively. So, my invitation is to make up some ideas, create new ideas, look at something and potentially look at it in a totally different way. Whatever it is, you drink a cup of coffee every day, you drink a cup of tea every day. Ask yourself, where did this plant that I'm drinking come from? This coffee, where did it come from? Did it come from Ecuador? How did it get here? And then maybe you imagine the little beans, little coffee beans popping off the trees and like running, like, I want to go to that. I want to go to his cup. I want to go to his cup right there. Bing. And just like allow yourself to just be silly with your thoughts. And then you can research it and find out that's not anywhere near what actually happened. So, yeah, so that's my invitation to start to activate the creative mind. And you don't need any materials for it. It's just a deep recognition that we have not been conditioned to even tap into our creative mind, giving ourselves the permission to think creatively, and then just kind of running with it. Can't mess it up, can't get it wrong. Like y'all, if y'all knew, I have a really creative mind. Like sometimes I'm like, what if we had shark teeth? Not necessarily sharp, because that would suck. Talk about biting your tongue. Ugh, you'd be goner. But like they have like rows of teeth on the roof of their mouths. Like, could you imagine? You'd be like chomp, 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 swallow. Like you would only have to chew things like 3 times, if that. You can never eat peanut butter sandwiches because it would get stuck to the roof of your mouth forever. It would have to dissolve. Like, how grateful am I that I have like a roof of my mouth without teeth on it? These are the things that I think about. I could go on forever. Anyway, so my invitation is to tap into your creative mind and kind of see what you can come up with. Maybe you write stories, maybe you start writing a story about a Coke can or something you see on the street and you just make up a story about that. You know, whatever that is. Maybe you meet a new person and you wonder, like, maybe you make up a story about where they came from. Who knows? No attachments. Maybe you meet a person and you're like, I don't know where they're from, but maybe they came from California and they were married 5 times, and they made their way over here to the East Coast, and they want to become a cobbler and start making shoes here. The end. Let your mind think creatively and see what new thoughts come forth from that. So, anyway, I love y'all, and I've enjoyed chatting about the creative mind. So, leave comments, leave creative ideas, whatever you got. I would love to see them and connect on that level. And I'm really grateful for your presence. So, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will